Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. And today, if you are willing to indulge me just a little bit, I'd like to take you back to my hometown of Chico, California, with help from my favorite local band of all time, the sophisticated, understated, and quietly dignified Vomit Lunch. Now, I must be perfectly honest with you and admit that I am not technically from Chico, California. I actually grew up in a really small town about 20 miles east of Chico, a town called Paradise. Now, I spent most of my adult life telling people that I am from Chico because up until semi-recently, unless you were really familiar with that very specific region of Northern California, you really would have no way of knowing what or where Paradise was. All of that changed, unfortunately, back in 2018 when the town of Paradise made global headlines and gained some sort of dubious notoriety when the town fell victim to what was, at least at that point in time, the deadliest wildfire in American history. So Paradise is actually where I grew up and went to high school. Not long after I graduated from high school in 1994, and yes, I graduated from high school. Smartass. Not long after I graduated high school in 1994, I moved out of my parents' house, which was something that we used to do back in those days. Most of us moved out of our parents' house in a reasonably timely manner. We usually didn't have a lot of interest in remaining latched to our mother's udders well into our 30s, but such was life back in those days. But not long after I graduated from high school, I moved out of my parents' house. I moved 20 miles to the west, took an apartment in Chico, California. Now, if you're not familiar with Chico, California, Chico is not exactly a bustling metropolis, but compared to the town that I grew up in, it was vibrant, it was thriving, it was alive. It's a college town. It's very young. It's very energetic. And to me, it felt like a very fun place to be that age. So I remember I moved into my very first apartment. And I have to admit that the first 6 months or so, living out on my own in my own apartment, wasn't necessarily the smoothest of transition. I was somebody who, growing up in middle school and high school, I basically only had one friend. That relationship hit rocky seas about 2/3 of the way through our senior year of high school. So I sort of ended up high school feeling completely alone, and I moved into my own apartment. Even though it was just 20 miles from my hometown, I really had no friends. I didn't really know anybody. I felt like I was very much alone. The real world was sort of chewing me up a little bit. I was only 18 years old at the time. I had no idea what I was doing. I really had no idea how to remedy the situation. But I remember at a certain point in time, I just made a conscious decision that I was going to start working. I was going to go out and put myself out there and try to make friends, which I ended up accomplishing. And I have to admit, after the first 6 months of my sort of transitioning into adult life, or quote-unquote adult life back in those days, if you will, I genuinely really enjoyed my time, living in Chico. Now, as a music lover back in those days, Chico had 4 thriving, awesome record stores. In our little downtown, of course, we had a Tower Records, which was something I always loved. We had a record store called Sundance. We had a record store that was called The Underground. That was where you could always find me if I wasn't at work or at school. Not that people were really looking for me, nevertheless. But that's where you could find me during my off time, was The Underground. It was sort of our counterculture, cool, badass rock and roll store. There was also a record store called Melody Records. Now, that was a place where a lot of the kind of older people kind of hung out. That's where you could find your Grateful Dead bootlegs and things like that. I didn't really spend a lot of time in Melody Records. back in my younger days. Now, as far as live music goes in Chico, back in those days, it was a little bit slim, to be honest with you. Now, in the summers in Chico, they have a park downtown. I don't actually know what the park is technically called, but back in those days, we used to call it Central Park. And during the weekends, or on Friday nights, I think it is during the summer, they have a free concert in the park series. Now, a lot of these bands, I used to go to it all the time, but a lot of these bands were just kind of like local, bluegrass and sort of jammy bands. A lot of stuff I didn't have, necessarily a lot of interest in, but it was live music, and it was something that if I wasn't working on Friday nights, it was something I would usually check out. But as far as like legitimate, real shows, back in those days, it was sort of slim. Back in Chico, there were a couple of venues back in those days that would actually book, semi-legitimate touring bands. I do remember seeing a band back in those days called Skanking Pickle, who were a third wave ska band from San Jose. They used to make the trip up to Chico periodically, and although this was sort of a kind of an underground, lesser known band, whenever they came to Chico, it was such a big thing because back in those days, Chico is sort of geographically a little bit isolated, and it wasn't a place that a lot of touring bands stopped. I also remember seeing G Love up in Chico once when I was going to school up there, and I think most notably, at least for me, and something that when I tell people it sort of tends to impress them for some reason, but I do remember seeing the band Sublime twice in Chico with the original lineup with singer Bradley Knoll. One show was at a place called the Lava Lounge in Chico, which is now and has been for a really long time. It's this sort of line dancing bar. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I can't remember the name of it right now. But at one time when I was a kid, it was like a comedy club. It was called the Top Flight Ballroom. I think it's now called the Wild Horse Saloon, if I'm not mistaken. That's the name that's popping in my head. But for a while, it was a comedy club called the Top Flight Ballroom. And then after the comedy club closed back in the mid-'90s, for just a very sort of brief window of time, it was a music venue called the Lava Lounge. And I remember I went to see Sublime at the Lava Lounge with Bradley Knoll, with the original lineup. It was before. That was actually how I kind of even figured out who Sublime was. About a year after that, I saw Sublime play in Chico again at the Central Park, at a concert in the park. Friday night was a free show. And if, according to urban legend, and this might just be Chico urban legend, but I believe it's accurate that Sublime actually played, that was actually the band's second to last show, that free show that I saw in Chico in Central Park. They played that show, and then I believe they played the next night in San Francisco, and then, of course, tragically, Bradley Knoll passed away in San Francisco, but it was right after the second time I saw the band in Chico, and of course, as you all know, right after he passed away, Sublime blew up and became huge. By 1996, though, I kind of realized a couple of things. One, that I was basically wasting time and pissing down my own leg by taking college courses. I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I was taking college classes because I felt like it's something that I should be doing. But really, I was just sort of wasting my time. I was getting, decent enough grades, but I wasn't really taking it seriously. I had no idea which direction I was going to take my academic career. So I basically dropped out of school and also realized that I was really starting to crave more of an urban experience. As much as I was enjoying Chico, I was enjoying my friends. I had a job, which especially looking back on now, was a great job. It was a fun job. I was basically a burger flipper in downtown Chico. I decided I wanted more of an urban experience, so in 1996, I packed up my belongings and I left my home area for the first time in my life, and I moved down to the Bay Area. And since then, I've spent most of my adult life living in bigger cities, which of course I have enjoyed. I am at heart an urbanite. I've always felt as though I was a city person. Even growing up in a very small town in the mountains of Northern California, I was always keenly aware, if you will, that I was more of a city person. But Chico is a place that I hold very dear and near and dear to my heart. It's a place that I go back to, at least a couple times a year. I was just back there in August. I got a chance to hang out with my best friend Tim. He and I hung around downtown Chico. And the funny thing about Chico, I think in general now, if you look at Chico today, at least in 2023, the last time I was there, is Chico has changed a lot. It's grown a lot. It's starting to take in a lot of people from the Bay Area. It also brought in a lot of people from my hometown of Paradise in 2018 after the campfire kind of wiped out the town. So Chico has grown. It's definitely going through a lot of growing pains. It's definitely getting expensive. But downtown, down near the university, Chico is still very much a true college town. It sometimes it feels like it's sort of positively locked in time. I go downtown Chico now. I sort of it still has the same feel to me it had when I first moved there in 1994. It kind of feels the same. It still sort of feels like home. And Chico's a place now to me, and I am, by nature, I think I'm somewhat of a sentimentalist. I don't deny that. I think if you pay attention to the content I post on this channel, that serves as evidence that I can become sometimes nostalgic. Now, I make it a point not to necessarily live in the past. That isn't my, luggage, but I am, very sentimental. Sadly, today, Chico doesn't have the 4 record stores that they used to have downtown. There's only one remaining. It is called Melody Records. Ironically, back in the day, it is the record store that I spent the least amount of time in because when I was a kid, I always associated it with the older dads who were in there to pick up their Neil Young and Grateful Dead records. Today, Melody Records is absolutely incredible. Every time I go to Chico, I stop into Melody Records and make sure I drop a few ducats on the counter. In fact, I'm wearing my Melody Records shirt today. Got to represent Chico. But as far as live music goes, Chico nowadays has really a few legitimate, authentic, real music venues, and it is very commonplace now for big touring bands to play through Chico. That is something that had I lived there back in the 1990s, and this was the way things were, I would have taken full advantage of it. But there's a couple big theaters in downtown Chico, places that when I was growing up in Paradise and living in Chico as a younger adult, they were movie theaters, but they have both been converted into live venues. One is the El Rey Theater. The other one is the Senator. I have been to a live show at the El Rey Theater, which I must admit was the Jugs. That place is absolutely beautiful. And to see live music there. Downtown Chico is just, there's something cool about it. One of my favorite things about Chico, though, I have to throw this plug out there before I move on. One of my favorite things about Chico is, and will always remain, that Chico has one of my favorite radio stations in the world. Basically, I have 3 radio stations that are my favorite of all time. My favorite radio station of all time, and this is probably a pretty generic choice based on the style of music I listen to, but my favorite radio station of all time is KEXP up in Seattle. Another radio station that I really love, and I lived in New Orleans for 2 years, 2 different stints. I've lived in New Orleans for 2 years. I really love the radio station WWOZ. Now, some of their programming isn't necessarily my thing all the time, but I love WWOZ. I have a lot of respect for it. But my third favorite radio station, or actually it's my second favorite radio station, behind KEXP, is a radio station in Chico. It is a community radio station. It is, as they describe themselves, listener-powered. It is 90.1. It is called a KZFR. Locals up there affectionately refer to it as the Zephyr. My dad is actually the one that kind of turned me on to KZFR back in high school. And it's something that, at the time, maybe I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have. But now, through kind of the miracle of technology, I am able to kind of check back on the KZFR. Once a month or so, I get in the habit where I will, I'll tune into KZFR through the website. I'll kind of see what they're playing. The music they play is very eclectic. It's always interesting. So you'll turn on KZFR and you'll hear some sort of style of music that you aren't completely familiar with, and then after a couple songs, the presenter will come on and he will tell you that you are listening to the Tanzanian Polka Parade here on KZFR, downtown Chico, California. And as you listen to the host of the show, you can't help but picture this guy who's probably in his 50s. He's got a ponytail. He's wearing a really, just a ratty flannel shirt. I mean, this guy doesn't buy clothes. He spends all of his money on Tanzanian polka parades, on Tanzanian polka records, I should say. He's got a little bit of a gut going, but this music is his life. It's his passion. It's his fire. And he hosts the show on KZFR in Chico because he's just desperate to share it with his community. That's one of the things I love about listening to KZFR is all of the shows, regardless if it's something that I'm into or not, the presenters and the people that host these shows on KZFR, they're just the biggest music dweebs in the world. People I can totally relate to. Whether the shows are the most mainstream pop thing you've ever heard or the most far out sub-genre of music that you can possibly imagine. All the people that host the show on KZFR are incredible. They're very knowledgeable. They're very passionate. And I have to show you one thing real quick before we move on. My dad, who, like I said, he's the one who kind of introduced me to KZFR back when I was probably in high school. My dad is sort of a local celebrity up in the Paradise Chico area. He was a political cartoonist for many years up in the town of Paradise for our old newspaper, the Paradise Post. And if you're not familiar with my home area politically, a lot of people who aren't from California or maybe who aren't super familiar with California, they think that California is, the entire state is just incredibly, left-wing, far out. People call it California. But actually the part of California that I grew up in, especially like the town of Paradise, not the town of Chico so much, because, the town of Chico is a college. It's very progressive. It's got a vibe. It's very kind of older hippie. A lot of old people from San Francisco and the Bay Area end up moving up to Chico. But the town of Paradise was very conservative, hyper-conservative. And my dad, who is a flower child, he is a radical left-wing liberal. I was very fortunate to grow up with parents who were very liberal, even in a town that was very conservative. I think there were parents of kids that I grew up with, became friends with, that my parents may have scared a little bit with their politics. But my dad was the political cartoonist for our local newspaper up in Paradise, and he's very left-wing, very opinionated. In the town of Paradise was very hyper-conservative. So my dad, for many years, 20, 30 years, was the sort of a local celebrity in Paradise because he was notorious for upsetting the right-wingers in my hometown. Anyway, back in 2000, he designed this sweatshirt for the radio station KZFR. And I want to give him a little bit of love. So if you haven't checked out KZFR in Chico, California, I would highly recommend you can throw it on online. They're always playing something interesting. Anyway, let's get into this band a little bit. The band is called Vomit Launch. This band formed in Chico, California in 1985. They released their first album, Not Even Pretty, in 1987. Their second album, Exiled Sandwich, came out in 1989. This is their third album. This record is called Mr. Spench. It came out in 1990. Now, if you're kind of unfamiliar with the band Vomit Launch, if you were to judge them by their name, having never heard them, you might have kind of an inaccurate picture in your mind of what this band sounds like. You might expect them to be hyper obnoxious, snotty, vulgar, kind of sloppy. But this band is actually not anything like what their name would suggest. This band is actually very sort of mellow, kind of indie. Back in these days, we had a term that we used to use. It's kind of a thing you don't hear so much anymore, but this band is very much a college rock band. Now, of course, Chico being a college town, it makes a lot of sense. This band actually did gain a fair amount of notoriety back in the late 80s and early 90s. And if you are somebody who is from Chico and you sort of are of a certain music palette and you are of a certain generation, this band kind of, I think, means a lot to you. A lot of people, I would suggest that probably 98% of the population out there probably don't even know who Vomit Launch are. But the 2% of people that do, this band was very important to them. This band, to me, has a real sort of Athens, Georgia, early REM, kind of Dead Milkmen, Pixies, Throwing Muses kind of vibe. Very mellow. Like I said, not bombastic, not super snotty, not kind of what you would expect, judging by their name. And now I have a dream that is sort of tied in with this band. I really have two sort of vocational dreams in my life. My first dream, if I could have my dream job, which it's attainable, it's not like I'm asking to become an astronaut or anything, but my dream job would be to own my own record store. That is my fantasy. Now, I admit that it's not exactly shooting for the stars. Nobody's going to mistake me as Elon Musk, but that is sort of my dream job. I am a very passionate music fan. I'm a very passionate record collector. I end up spending all of my time in record stores, anyway, so what's the difference? But my second dream job would be to make documentaries about bands. Of course, every band now, it seems like, has their own, rockumentary. If I could get sort of into that, line of work, I think it would be pretty snug. Of course, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't have any qualifications. But that being said, this is the age of entitlement. I should just be allowed to do it, shouldn't I? But if I ever had the opportunity to make music documentaries, there would be two bands that I would start with. The first one would be a band I've talked about on this channel several times already. And that would be the Mr. T Experience. That was a band that was very important to me back right around this point in my life. I moved to the Bay Area in 1996. I discovered that band. Not long after that, I've been a huge fan for most of my life. It's a band that I think is underappreciated in 2024. I think it's a band that would make an interesting documentary. I don't know why there isn't one now, but I would definitely be interested in making a documentary about the Mr. T Experience. Another band for me would be, I would love to make a documentary about the band Vomit Launch, not only because they are from my hometown, basically, but this is a band that has fallen into ultimate cult status. I would love to go back and meet the members of this band, find out what Chico was like back in 1985 when you were playing this style of music in a town that was pretty rural. I would just love to go back and immerse myself in the Chico culture back. And of course, I was growing up in Paradise, just 20 miles from Chico, but I wasn't at an age back in 1985 to be going to see like Vomit Launch shows. And sadly, this is a band that, this band broke up in 1992. This is a band I unfortunately never got a chance to see live. Now, if you go back on YouTube, you can find all kinds of cool archive live footage of this band. But man, someday I would love to make a documentary about this band, or at least I hope that somebody that is talented and qualified in that field considers making a documentary about this band, because I think that this is a band that nowadays is just completely underappreciated. If you go back to Chico back in kind of like the early 1990s, there were really kind of two Chico bands back in those days that had gained some amount of notoriety and a little bit of fame, at least. One of them being Vomit Launch, a band that I absolutely love, my favorite local band of all time. The other band was a band called the Mother Hips. Now, I think the Mother Hips are still active. I just recently looked them up online to see if they were. And it says that the band is now based out of Roseville, California, but this was a band that was originally from Chico. The Mother Hips are another band that I actually got to see, if you want to say got to see. A band I got to see at the Concert in the Park series in downtown Chico one summer night. The Mother Hips, to me, were just kind of a shitty sort of jam Grateful Dead wannabe. Not really my thing. Not very good, in my opinion. But they were a band that kind of took off out of Chico as well. I have always... This is probably something I've just conjured up in my own head, but to me there's this fierce rivalry between Vomit Launch and the Mother Hips, and of course I am Team Vomit Launch every day. I don't really have much use for the band Mother Hips, but if you haven't checked out Vomit Launch, all 4 of their full-length records are available to listen to on Spotify. So let's get into this record. This record, as I mentioned, it was the band's 3rd record. This record came out in 1992. It is called Mr. Spench. This album features the band's, I think, only real lineup, which was guitarist Lindsey Thrasher, Steve Bragg on drums, Patricia Rowland on vocals, and bassist Lawrence Crane. I love the album art on this. It is very interesting. It's a little bit confusing, but it sort of matches if you go through and you listen to this band's music and you study their lyrics. It's sort of fitting. There's a nice picture of the band back in 1990. Again, a band that I absolutely love. The first song on this record is a song called Vent. To me, this song has a very kind of early REM vibe. As I mentioned before, this band would be very much at home in Athens, Georgia. Around the same time, they have a lot of Athens sort of influence. To me, I feel like this song is about living inside of a toxic mind, feeling crippled by anxiety, the sting of self-doubt, the relentlessness debilitating depression. This song is beautiful, but it's also very uneasy. I have a lot of sympathy for the character in this song because I kind of am the character in this song. That's one thing about this record I should have mentioned before. This record is really dark. It's depressive. It's uneasy. There are times when it kind of makes you squirm a little bit in your chair. But like I said, I am the person in this song, and I am somebody who, throughout my life, is somebody like a lot of people. I'm not saying that this is unique. I'm in no way, abnormal for saying this, but, I'm somebody who has struggled with mental health throughout my life. It's something that I am very grateful that mental health is now something that is being taken more seriously and given the respect and attention it deserves. That's what this song makes me think of. The second song after this, the second song on the record is a song called Every Pretty Girl. This song has kind of like a bouncy indie sort of post-punk, maybe kind of like an up-tempo REM song. Lyrically, this song to me is a little bit of a riddle. I can't figure out if the character in this song is comparing the reality of herself versus the idealized version of herself, or if she's basically just comparing herself to unrealistic and unfair beauty standards. This song, regardless, either way, the song reeks of body dysmorphia. That is something, again, I am just ultra familiar with. Body dysmorphia is probably one of my defining characteristics in my life. I'm not proud to say that. I am somebody who, despite being a man in his mid-40s, is somebody who has struggled with an eating disorder throughout most of my life. And regardless of I'm overweight or underweight, which I've been both in my adult life, I always have this really sort of distorted view of myself. I was telling somebody this the other day. They were asking me, they were new to Nashville. They were asking me for, food advice. Nashville's a semi-decent food city. It's definitely not San Francisco or Chicago or New York by any means, but the food here is good for the most part. And they're asking me for food advice, and I was telling somebody this. I was telling them, I was like, I'm always like the wrong person to ask about food because, for one thing, I'm not picky. Like, I'm not a foodie. I'm not somebody who has, places that I go or places I don't go. But really, food is something for me that I just have such a terrible, dysfunctional relationship with. It's something that goes back probably to my childhood. I was telling them I basically get no enjoyment out of food. Food is something that I have a very unhealthy relationship with. Whenever I eat, whether it is the grossest, nastiest, fattiest meal of all time, or if I eat a piece of kale, I have this sort of guilt that goes along with food. I was telling them, I hope before I die in my life, the way technology is going, I think this could happen. But what I'm hoping for before I die is that food is no longer a thing in our lives. I'm waiting for the day when they can plug us in at the end of the night like an iPhone. And, you wake up the next day, you have all of the nutrients and all of the energy that you need to get you through life. That is, as far as technology goes, that's what I'm hoping for. Let's get off of the AI and let's start putting, some financial technological planning towards this. At least for people like me who have body dysmorphia issues, eating disorders, and get no enjoyment out of food. The next song after that is a song called Proven Parts. Man, I love this song. This is actually one of my favorite songs on the entire record. This song reeks of like desperation and confusion. The lyrics to this song sound like basically a labyrinth of dead ends. It sort of talks about life's anxieties and disappointment. You build up to a point where you become basically like this. It builds up to the point where you just basically become just like this heap of unanswerable questions. To me, this song reminds me of the first time I lived in New Orleans. My ex-girlfriend and I moved to New Orleans from Seattle. I think it was in 2012-ish, 2011, 2012. We moved to New Orleans. It wasn't long after Hurricane Katrina, which was our first mistake. We moved to New Orleans sight unseen. I've lived all over the country, but New Orleans was the only place I've ever lived where I moved having never been there. That was strike two, basically. And when we got to New Orleans, we basically discovered that there was no economy. Really, there wasn't hardly any jobs to be had. And we really fell into a desperate struggle not long after getting there. And it basically reminds me of this song because every place I turned, every idea I had, every notion I had to dig us out of this muck that we found ourselves in just turned out to be another dead end. I would get a lead for something that wouldn't pan out, or I would take the little bit of money I had and I would invest it in an idea that would just blow up in my face. Also, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, I was sort of self-sabotaging our move a little bit through my own irresponsible behavior. But it reminds me of this song because I remember the first year I lived in New Orleans, everywhere I turned, it would just seem like a brick wall, just went up in my face. And my ex-girlfriend and I lasted in New Orleans for a year, basically, before everything just like fell apart and we had no choice but to run back to Seattle with our tails between our legs. The next song after that is a song called Hospital Blunder. I love this song. This is another song I really love. Another song that has kind of an early REM, sort of Athens kind of vibe. This song is about trying to run away from yourself, escape the prison of your own poisonous mind. This can manifest itself in many ways. This is something that I think I've told you on this channel. I just mentioned it a second ago, but I've talked about before how I've moved around a lot in my adult life. I tend to get somewhere, and after a couple years, I tend to get the 7-year itch. I tend to get, disinterested. I become bored with the place. I start thinking about other places I want to leave, and my wife and I have been living here in Nashville for about 3.5 years, which is a long time for us, and we actually just signed another year lease to stay here for at least one more year, which is sort of, pushing my comfort zone when it comes to living someplace for this long. And I lived in Seattle for 12 years, or 12 or 13 years, which was definitely beyond my comfort zone at that point in time. But there is a psychology, at least I've discovered, sort of analyzing myself, that there is psychology to wanting to move around all the time. And part of it for me, I do believe, has been in the past sort of a case where I was kind of running away from myself. I think my wife and I actually, with our life as it is right now, I think her and I are both generally pretty content. I think that's why we've been in Nashville for as long as we've been, and we're going to be here for at least another year. And beyond that, at this point in time, I don't even really see us being in a hurry to leave. I've told people this, as much as I've moved around and as much fun as it's been, and I've had a good time with it, I've met a lot of awesome people. I've lived in just great places. I've never really traveled much. I've been all throughout the United States, but I've never really traveled much. So one thing I would like to do is stop, moving around so much and start actually, traveling, go see the world a little bit. And to do that, you have to set up like a home base, I guess. And I never really thought that Nashville would be a place that I would settle. But as my wife and I have been here as long as we have, and she's starting to make friends and get involved in things that she loves, I guess it could happen. It's a scary thought to me, honestly, to settle somewhere. It's sort of uneasy. It's my nature to pack the boxes and head on down the road. The next song after that is a song called Bug Under a Magnifying Glass. Musically, this song is a little bit different to me. This song is sort of a cross between early Echo and the Bunnymen and kind of early Midnight Oil. I really like the sound of this song. To me, this song sort of confuses me. Is it as simple as a drunken rant directed at someone that you're no longer involved with? Is it about alcohol abuse? Did their drinking put them in this position? Is it someone trying to unsuccessfully convince themselves that they're better off, with somebody that they're no longer with? Lyrically, this song is just kind of like lyrically, the song just kind of sounds like a little bit of a drunken ramble, something I'm sure that I have been very guilty of in the past. I'm sure we've all, or at least I have had, those mornings after a night of drinking with friends where you think during the night when you're having these conversations, whether you're talking about something as benign as records and music or whether you're talking about something really important, like life and relationship type stuff, you think you're being articulate, you think you're saying things that are intelligent, and then you wake up the next morning, you remember some of the things you said, and you're just like, oh my god, I'm an idiot. Anyway, the next song after that is a song called Switch. I really love this song. This song to me is about protecting somebody you love at all cost. Watching somebody you love kind of slowly die, maybe, as you kind of helplessly watch. This song actually has a music video you can go back and find on YouTube. I love the video for this song. Now, according to Chico Urban Legend, and I don't know if this is true or not, but according to Chico Urban Legend, this video actually got played on MTV's 120 Minutes at least once. Now, I never saw it on there, but I'm not saying it didn't happen. But the video for this song is awesome. It's very Chico early 1990s. So if you haven't seen the video for the song Switch by Vomit Launch, definitely go back and check that out. The side one ends with a song called Take It Outside. To me, I don't really love this song. This is probably the weakest song on the record. This is a record full of songs I love. There's really not anything that's really bad on this album. I wouldn't say there's a ton of clunkage, but this song is kind of borderline clunkage, at least in my opinion. Side 2 starts off with a song called Relapsation. This is sort of kind of an up-tempo indie punk type, maybe a little bit of throwing muses, maybe some early up-tempo REM kind of influences. To me, is a tragic love song to your favorite and most self-destructive vice. It's a song about basically relapsing. I think it could also be seen as a song maybe about relapsing back into an unhealthy relationship. That's the thing about this band. I think a lot of their lyrics can sort of be interpreted in many ways. And I'm not saying that when I interpret these songs on this record or any other record, I'm not saying that this is like what it's about. This is sort of my interpretation of it. But to me, this song is sort of a tragic love song to your most self-destructive vice, whether it's a chemical or a behavior pattern or anything like that. It could also be, like I said, I could also see it being about maybe getting back together or falling back into a relationship that is really unhealthy. I had my most unhealthy relationship I ever had was with my ex-girlfriend, and her and I were together for about 3 years, and then we broke up for probably a few months, at least 4 or 5 months, and then we ended up getting back together for another 2 years, and it was it was nothing nice. All the promises that were made by both of us during our sort of break in the middle never came to fruition. It was just an awful, disgusting relationship. Not saying that she's an awful, disgusting person, because she certainly isn't, at least in my opinion. I harbor no resentment, but man, you talk about two people at their unhealthiest. The next song after that is a song called Donut Ass Me Butt. This song definitely has a very Athens, Georgia vibe. I think the song is sort of about kind of watching your dreams slip away. It's very sad. To me, that's what this song, sort of the picture that the lyrics paint, at least in my opinion. The next song after that is a song called Pay Your Own Rent. I think this is a song about basically wanting to escape your surroundings. The lyrics say, if I had a car, I would drive away. If my bike worked, I would ride away. To me, this is sort of what I was describing earlier, feeling of sort of desperately wanting to run away from yourself. I used to joke with people when they asked me why I move around so much. I used to make this joke. I say, well, I was just trying to get away from myself, but everywhere I moved, I would turn up. And that's sort of what this song reminds me of. This song is awesome. One of my favorite songs on the entire record. The next song after that is a song called Out of the Way. This song feels very hopeless. I think it makes reference to the emptiness one feels as they struggle through a lifetime of crippling depression. At the end, the narrator explains that all of their belongings are placed and stored in a closet. Is this in anticipation of some self-inflicted tragedy? Or is this song being told from the perspective of post-self-inflicted tragedy? To me, this song feels very suicidal. It feels very helpless, very dark. But man, it's so good. This is another one of the best songs on the record, in my opinion. Most of the songs on this record are just the jugs, in my opinion. The next song after that is a song called Kill the Bouncer. To me, this song has like a real, kind of Dead Milkmen sort of musical vibe to it. Very straightforward. I think this is one of the few sort of straightforward songs on the record. Not necessarily my favorite. I think if I had to pick a second favorite or second least favorite song off this record, it would probably be Kill the Bouncer. The next song after that is Dripping Walls. This is another song that I would describe as being okay. It's definitely better than Kill the Bouncer, but it's definitely better than, Take It Outside. But this song sounds like the inner dialogue of somebody completely obsessing over something, or probably more likely somebody. It is a good song, like I said. It's not necessarily my favorite. It's very obsessive in its lyrical content. The next song after that is Dog Sauce. This song is just straightforward, angry, punk sounding. I love this song. It sort of is a nice tempo change from some of the other kind of more indie, early REM kind of sounding stuff. This song is pissed off, but it's very empowering. I think this song is about discovering your strength and self-value and shoving it in the face of somebody that has made you question such things. I love this song. To me, this is one of my favorite songs on the record. I mean, how many times have I said that on this video? The last song on this record is a song called Siamese Twins Visit Their Two-Headed Brother in the Hospital. To me, this song, again, has a very sort of early Dead Milkmen kind of feel to it. No complaints there on my part. This song, I think, is about being manipulated by your own insecurity and fear of loneliness. And those sort of contribute to drive you into the arms of a very unhealthy relationship. Fear of loneliness and feeling of insecurity is probably the worst motivation for ever getting involved in a relationship. I can tell you that from firsthand experience, but I've probably bored you enough with my stories on this video, so be sure to check back for my next one. Anyway, that closes out the record. This record, in my opinion, is very snug. Like I said, this is a band that I take a lot of pride in, being from my home area. This is a band that is extremely important to me. Unfortunately, this is a band that I did not even discover, I think, probably until... I think I actually discovered this band when I first moved to the Bay Area back in 1996. I didn't know who they were. Like I said, this record came out in 1990. In 1992, the band released their final album, Dog-Eared, which is the only other record of theirs, sadly, that I own on physical format. I have that record on CD. The band played their last ever show on December 11th, 1992, before calling it a day. Guitarist Lindsey Thrasher and bassist Larry Crane both eventually moved to Portland. They both got involved in pretty cool business ventures. I know that Lindsey Thrasher, at least at one point in time, owned Exile Records up in Portland. And Larry Crane went into publishing. And drummer Steve Bragg and vocalist Patricia Rowland, according to my research at least, both still live in the Chico area. So if you are unfamiliar with this band, Vomit Launch, be sure to go out and check them out. I severely doubt that you will be disappointed. It was a lot of fun going back and listening to this record over this past week, really sort of trying to at least dig into and analyze their lyrics. Lyrically, this band can be very sort of confusing. Like I said, when I try to interpret lyrics, I'm not necessarily interpreting lyrics as if this is what it means. It's just sort of how I interpret it. But as I was going through and really reading through the band's lyrics, there's a lot of different ways you can sort of break this down. But anyway, go back and check out the band Vomit Launch from my home area of Chico, California. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store. Check back every week for Morrissey Monday, a weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And until next time, my friends, I'll talk to you then.